even Paul, with all of his confidence in eternity and in Christ's power over death, he still named the sorrowfulness and the wrongness of death while still pointing to the hope of Christ. 1 Corinthians 15:26 states that the last enemy to be destroyed will be death. Jesus even said himself in John 10, verse 10, that the enemy comes to kill, to steal, and to destroy. But Jesus came that we may have life and life abundantly. So how do we wrap our minds around this egregious evil while we're trying to look to the hope of heaven? Well, I just want us to open our Bibles and look at an example from Paul, the great apostle of hope. Paul, he held grief and hope together. And we actually see a really interesting picture of this in the book of Philippians. One verse in particular that's circulating that I'm sure you have seen if you've spent any amount of time online in the last few days is to live is Christ and to die is to gain. And that is true. But I just want us to anchor it into the context of the whole book by bringing another layer of emotional consideration to Paul's words on death. Because yes, chapter 1, verse 21, he says, "For me to live is Christ and to die is to gain." But then in the very next chapter, in chapter 2, he's talking about his ill friend, or his formerly ill friend Epaphroditus, and he's discussing how happy he is that he'd been healed, because he says, if he had died or hadn't been spared, I would have experienced sorrow upon sorrow. So what does that show us? It shows us that even Paul, with all of his confidence in eternity and in Christ's power over death, he still named the sorrowfulness and the wrongness of death while still pointing to the hope of Christ.